The small room, once filled with laughter and voices, now echoed with nothing but silence. The widow sat in the corner by the window, her body frail, her hands trembling as they clasped together. Every day felt the same, endless stretches of stillness. The ticking of the clock was the loudest sound in the room, marking the slow passage of time that had become a heavy burden. She had no visitors, no family to keep her company. The loneliness had settled in her bones, mingling with the pain that had crept into her body with each passing year. Her heart, once full of joy, had grown quiet, weighed down by grief and solitude. It was a quiet pain, one that only tears could express. She wiped her eyes, but they quickly filled again. The room was dark now, the fading light of the evening casting long shadows across the floor. She could hardly remember the last time she had spoken to anyone, the last time someone had held her hand or looked into her eyes with tenderness. Her thoughts turned inward, to a place where the ache of loss seemed impossible to escape. "Will it always be like this?" she thought. But no answer came, just the sound of her own sobs, the only sound left in the room. In the stillness, she closed her eyes and whispered, "I can't do this anymore." Her words hung in the air, unheard, unnoticed by anyone but herself. The pain in her joints was constant, a companion that she had learned to live with over the years. It started as a dull throb and grew into something more intense with each passing day. Sometimes it felt like the pain would swallow her whole, pushing her into a world of darkness and despair. But it wasn't just the physical pain. The ache in her heart was deeper, more overwhelming than anything her body could endure. It was the emptiness of loss, the absence of her late husband, the loneliness that had grown so familiar she could hardly remember a time when it wasn't there. Each morning, she awoke to the same silent house, the same empty bed, and the same relentless pain in her body. She had tried to pray, to ask for help, but the words seemed to fade before they reached the heavens. The silence from God felt like an answer in itself, a silence that whispered, "You are alone." But the ache in her soul was not just from being alone. It was the weight of unspoken regrets, the memories of things left undone, of things she never said or did. She took a slow breath, feeling the sharpness of the pain in her chest. "Will this ever end?" she asked herself again, but the answer came back the same: silence. The chair across from her at the kitchen table had sat empty for years, but it always felt as though someone should be sitting there. She had tried to fill the space with small distractions, books, knitting, the quiet hum of the radio, but nothing ever seemed to replace the presence that used to sit with her. Her husband had once sat there, smiling at her over a cup of tea, sharing stories of the day. Their conversations had filled the house with warmth. Now the chair was just another reminder of what was lost. Every time she looked at it, the emptiness seemed to grow, as if the absence of his presence had swallowed everything else in her life. The silence stretched, unbearable and unending. The sound of her own breathing was the only thing that filled the space now. The chair, untouched, stood as a monument to the days gone by, and she wondered if she would ever be able to fill it again. She sighed, the weight of it all pressing on her chest. She reached for the empty chair and ran her fingers along the worn wood. A quiet prayer slipped from her lips. "I wish for something, someone, to fill this empty space." But the words, like so many others, disappeared into the silence that filled her life. Days blended into one another so softly she could hardly tell where one ended and the next began. The old woman moved slowly through her home, touching the furniture as if to remind herself that she was still here, that the world around her still existed. Yet everything seemed distant now, as if she were living behind a veil of glass. Her friends had all passed on one by one, each leaving behind a quiet ache. The neighborhood had changed. New families filled the houses, their voices young, their laughter unfamiliar. The market clerk no longer recognized her. Even her own reflection had become a stranger. Her face lined, her eyes dimmer, her smile rare. She would sit by the window and watch the world move without her. Children played in the street. Couples walked hand in hand. The mailman waved to someone down the road. but never to her. She had become invisible, fading into the background of life, like the last light of day slipping beyond the horizon. She remembered the words her husband once told her, "We are never truly alone. God always sees us." But now, in the stillness of her empty house, she wondered if even God's eyes had turned away. The thought stung, and she looked down at her trembling hands, whispering, "Do you still see me, Lord?" The clock ticked on, indifferent, as the world outside went on without her. Night was the hardest. When the sun disappeared, the weight of the hours seemed to grow heavier. The pain in her joints would flare, spreading like fire through her legs and back. She tried to sleep, but the throbbing would wake her again and again, each time sharper than before. But it wasn't the pain of her body that hurt the most. It was the loneliness that settled in with the darkness, the silence that grew so loud she could almost hear it breathing. She would turn on the radio just to fill the emptiness, but even the soft music could not touch the cold space inside her. Sometimes she cried quietly into her pillow, her frail shoulders shaking. "Lord, why must I hurt like this?" she whispered. "If you hear me, please just let me rest." Her words dissolved into the dark. No light, no answer, only the slow rhythm of her pain and the steady ticking of the clock. She thought of the nights long ago when her husband would hold her hand until sleep came. "Don't worry," he used to say, "morning always comes." But now the nights felt endless, and she wondered if the morning still knew how to find her. She closed her eyes, tears still slipping down her face, and whispered one more time, "Please, Lord, I'm so tired." It had been weeks since she had prayed with words. Her Bible sat by her bedside, its pages worn from years of devotion, but now it gathered dust. Every time she reached for it, her heart felt too heavy, her mind too weary to begin. The prayers that once flowed easily had vanished, replaced by sighs, by silence, by tears. She remembered how she used to pray for her family, her friends, her neighbors. Now there was no one left to pray for but herself, and even that felt selfish somehow. What could she ask for now? The pain was still there, the loneliness remained. The days passed, but heaven seemed unmoved. That night, she sat in her chair and looked up at the ceiling, as though she could see through it into the heavens. "Do you still listen, Lord?" she asked softly. "Because I don't know what to say any more." Her words drifted into the stillness. She waited, hoping for something, a feeling, a sound, a sign. But the room remained silent. Only the faint hum of the refrigerator answered her. Tears filled her eyes, but she didn't wipe them away. They fell quietly onto her hands, shining in the dim light. She bowed her head and let them fall freely, each tear a wordless prayer. And though she didn't know it, heaven heard every one. Morning came pale and heavy. She moved slowly from her bed to the chair by the window, each step a small effort. The air was still, her breath shallow. Sometimes she wondered how much longer her body could keep going. But what frightened her wasn't death, it was dying alone. She had seen it happen to others, friends who had slipped quietly away in empty rooms, their names barely remembered. She feared that for herself, that her story would end in silence, with no one to know, no one to pray. The thought chilled her more than the pain ever could. Her eyes wandered to the cross, hanging on the wall, its wood worn smooth by time. She used to draw strength from it. But now even that small symbol seemed distant, unreachable. "Will I just fade away?" she whispered, "like a shadow when the light changes?" She wrapped her arms around herself and closed her eyes. She wasn't ready to leave this world, not yet, but she was so tired of living in this quiet ache, a half-life of memories and longing. The wind outside stirred faintly, brushing against the window pane, and for a brief second she thought she heard a voice, soft, like breath. But when she opened her eyes, there was only silence again. The fear returned, heavier than before, and yet somewhere deep inside her a flicker of something remained, not hope, not faith, but a small, trembling desire. "Don't let me go alone." That evening, the weight became too much. The pain in her body was sharp, her spirit worn thin. She hadn't eaten, hadn't spoken, hadn't prayed. The house felt colder than usual. as if even the air had given up trying to comfort her. She sat in the dark, staring at the small lamp she hadn't turned on, and thought, maybe it's time. Her breath trembled as she looked around the room, her husband's chair, the faded curtains, the cross on the wall. "I can't do this anymore," she said aloud, her voice breaking. "I can't live like this. I can't keep waiting for you to come." She folded her hands, not to pray but to steady them. "If you're there, Lord, please just let me go home." The tears came freely, falling onto her lap, each one a drop of surrender. The night grew deeper. Hours passed, but she didn't move. Her body felt heavy, her heartbeat slow. For a moment, she thought this might be the end, and she wasn't afraid. She was too tired to be afraid. But then, in the stillness, something shifted. A calmness filled the air. Quiet, but unmistakable. The room felt different, as if someone had entered. The shadows seemed to soften. The air felt warm. She opened her eyes, and for the first time in years, the darkness didn't feel empty. Something unseen had come, but it did not frighten her. It felt holy. It was late, past midnight, perhaps. The air was thick with quiet when she heard it. A knock, gentle, steady, not from the front door, but from somewhere deeper, like a sound that came not through her ears, but through her heart. She froze, listening. Another knock, then silence. Then one more, softer than the first, but full of presence. Her breath caught. "Who's there?" she whispered. There was no answer, yet something stirred within her, a warmth spreading through her chest. The knock came again, but this time it didn't sound like a request to come in. It sounded like an invitation for her to open the door she had long kept closed, the one inside her heart, sealed shut by pain and disappointment. She didn't move, but tears filled her eyes. Her lips trembled. "Is it you?" she whispered. The words felt foolish, yet somehow right. The silence that followed was deep, alive, and in that silence she felt it, a presence, patient and kind, waiting just beyond the walls of her sorrow. She closed her eyes, laid her hand over her heart, and felt the faint rhythm there, a pulse that no longer felt like loneliness but like a response. The knock had come from within. The next morning felt different, though she couldn't explain why. The air was softer, carrying something gentle, something living. She moved slowly through her little home, and every corner seemed less empty, as if the shadows themselves had grown kind. When she sat in her chair by the window, she felt it again, the quiet awareness that she was no longer alone. There was no sound, no sight of anyone, and yet she knew someone was there. Not a ghost, not a dream, but a presence, steady, silent, full of love. Her breath trembled as she whispered, "Are you here?" The words felt fragile, like glass, but they were met by warmth, not around her, but inside her. The heaviness she had carried for so long seemed to lift slightly, just enough for her to breathe without pain. She didn't see him, but she felt him. The one who had knocked had entered, not with fanfare or light or thunder, but with gentleness, as if he had been waiting for the smallest crack in her heart to open. And in that soft morning light, she felt it, the unmistakable truth that Jesus had come, not to speak, not to correct, not even to heal her pain just yet, but simply to stay. Over the next few days, her house seemed to change. The walls no longer felt cold, the rooms no longer echoed with emptiness. Even the morning light seemed brighter, resting kindly on everything it touched. It wasn't just the sun that filled the place, it was something deeper, something unseen. When she woke at dawn, she felt peace before her eyes even opened. It was as if light had entered her heart and begun to spread outward, slow, gentle, unstoppable. The shadows that used to sit heavy on her chest had thinned, and in their place came warmth. Her pain didn't vanish completely, her joints still ached, her body still tired, but somehow it no longer ruled her. The ache in her soul, the deeper one, had begun to quiet. There was still silence, yes, but it was no longer empty. It was full of presence, full of him. One afternoon, as sunlight spilled across the floor, she smiled for no reason at all. It wasn't the kind of smile that comes from happiness. It was the smile of someone who has been found. The light stayed long after the sun went down. It happened one evening, as she sat reading her Bible by lamplight. Her eyes were tired and her hands ached from holding the book. She set it aside and closed her eyes, breathing a soft prayer, not for strength or healing, but simply to say thank you. And then she felt it. A touch, light as air, warm as sunlight. A hand rested gently on her shoulder. It didn't startle her. It didn't make her afraid. It was the kind of touch that carried peace, not surprise. Her breath caught as tears filled her eyes. She didn't move, afraid that if she did, the touch might fade. But it stayed, gentle, real, steady. It felt familiar too, as if she had known it all her life, though she had never felt it before. A whisper rose within her heart, not a voice she heard, but one she felt. "I never left you." Her tears fell freely then, running down her wrinkled cheeks. She covered her hand over her shoulder, but there was nothing there, nothing the world could see. Yet her soul knew what her eyes could not. Jesus was near, and he had come to comfort her. She bowed her head, not in fear, but in rest. For the first time in many years, she felt safe, completely, deeply safe. That night, she lay in bed with her hands folded over her heart, still feeling the warmth of that unseen touch. The room was quiet, but the silence was no longer heavy. It hummed softly like the air before dawn. As she drifted between wakefulness and sleep, words began to form, not in her ears but deep within her soul. "You are not alone." The phrase came like breath, not loud, not startling, but sure. It filled her chest, spreading through her like light. She wanted to speak back, to answer, but she didn't know how. The only response she could give was a trembling whisper, "Thank you." Then more words, quiet as a heartbeat, "I have always been here." Tears filled her eyes. Her mind couldn't explain it, but her spirit understood. The one she had cried to for so long had not been distant. He had been beside her, in her pain, in her long nights, in her silence. The thought overwhelmed her, but not with sorrow, with peace. As the night deepened, she breathed slowly, resting in that unseen conversation. A dialogue of presence, not sound. No sermon, no thunder, no command. Just love, speaking softly in the language of the heart. And for the first time in years, she fell asleep without fear, wrapped in a peace she could neither name nor lose. The following morning, peace lingered like sunlight through her window. She woke early, her body still frail, but her spirit alive, steady, renewed. She sat in her chair, looking at the quiet world outside, and realized she could feel him there. Not in the air or the light, but in every breath she took. The pain hadn't vanished, yet it no longer ruled her days. It came and went like a passing visitor, but her heart remained calm beneath it. Each breath felt like a prayer, each moment like a small miracle. She poured herself a cup of tea and sat at the table, whispering softly, "You stayed." The words made her smile. For so long, her prayers had been filled with pleading, "Help me, heal me, find me." But now there was nothing to ask. Just gratitude, just stillness. The air around her seemed alive with presence. Even the faint creak of the chair, the gentle hum of the refrigerator, felt like part of something sacred, a kind of music she could finally hear. And as she closed her eyes, she realized the truth her heart had waited for. Peace doesn't come when pain disappears. Peace comes when Jesus enters it. Later that afternoon, she opened her old Bible. Its pages were marked with faded notes and soft pencil lines. She turned to the Gospels, reading slowly about the one who healed the sick, who touched the lonely, who called the forgotten by name. Her eyes filled as she read about the moment Jesus looked upon the widow of Nain, whose son had died, how his heart was moved with compassion before he spoke a word. She could almost see that face, kind and sorrowful all at once. And for the first time, she realized that same face had looked upon her too. The Jesus in her mind was no longer far away, no longer confined to the pages of her Bible. He was here, The same loving presence that had entered her house, touched her shoulder, and whispered in her silence. The same eyes that had wept with compassion now watched her with tenderness. She closed the book, pressing it gently against her chest. "You came to me," she whispered, "just like you did for her." The words trembled, but her heart was steady. She didn't need to see his face to believe. She had felt it, in her tears, in her breath, in the quiet light that now lived inside her. And in that moment, she realized she no longer missed his presence, because he had never left. It wasn't dramatic the way peace settled into her life. No sudden miracle, no blinding light. It came quietly, like dawn seeping through the edges of night. Her body still ached, but her soul no longer groaned beneath its weight. Something inside her had changed, not the pain itself, but what it meant. Each morning, she woke with purpose again. She no longer counted the hours of her loneliness. Instead, she watched the slow rise of light, whispering a soft thank you before her feet touched the floor. Her prayers were fewer now, but they were truer, shaped not by need, but by gratitude. The world had not become easier. Her knees still hurt when she bent to pick something up. Her hands still trembled as she poured her tea. Yet she felt lighter, as if invisible hands carried part of her burden. Even the smallest movements, opening her curtains, brushing her hair, folding her blanket, felt sacred, as though love itself were woven into the ordinary. Sometimes she would pause, mid-task, and smile. She could feel him near. Not in the way one feels the air or the sunlight, but deeper, like a heartbeat beneath her own. The healing had not come to her body, not yet. It had come to her heart, and that was enough. Days passed in gentle rhythm. Her house remained quiet, but it no longer felt hollow. The silence that had once tormented her now sang softly around her, a melody without sound, born of peace and presence. One afternoon, she sat by the open window and listened to the world outside. Children played in the distance. Birds sang. Somewhere someone laughed. All of it wove together into something beautiful. But beneath those sounds, there was another, a stillness alive with joy. She closed her eyes, and in that sacred hush, she heard it. Not with her ears, but with her heart. A song, simple, wordless, tender. It rose and fell like breath. Not music, but something purer. It was his voice, not speaking this time, but singing, not to the world, to her. Tears slipped down her cheeks, but she didn't wipe them away. She didn't need to understand it. She only listened, resting in the soundless song that filled the space between heaven and her little room. It was then she realized love had its own language, and now she was fluent in it. The morning sun rose bright and golden. She woke with a strange feeling, not newness, but renewal. Everything looked the same old curtains, the same cup on her table, the same garden outside her window. Yet somehow, everything shimmered. She walked slowly to the window and smiled. The world seemed softer, as though it too had been touched by grace. The flowers in her small garden swayed gently, alive with color. The air smelled of dew and life. She whispered, "You've made everything new again." She brewed her tea and sat in her favorite chair. For the first time, she realized she hadn't cried in weeks. The ache in her heart was still there, but it no longer hurt. It had become a place of remembrance, a space where Jesus had entered and chosen to stay. Her Bible lay open on the table beside her. The words looked brighter somehow. She traced her finger over one verse. "Lo, I am with you always." And she smiled, not because she believed it, but because she now knew it. The light from the window fell across her face, warm and full of promise. It was the same world, the same life, but the morning was new, and so was she. The afternoon sun was soft when a gentle knock echoed through the quiet house. The widow blinked in surprise. Visitors had long become a rarity. She stood slowly, her knees aching, and opened the door. On the porch stood her young neighbor, holding a small basket of fruit and smiling shyly. "Good afternoon," the girl said. "I've seen you in your garden lately. I thought I'd bring you something." The widow smiled, her eyes glistening. "That's very kind of you, dear," she said softly, stepping aside. The young woman entered, her voice filling the house like sunlight spilling through open curtains. They sat together for a while, talking about the flowers, the weather, and the children playing outside. The widow laughed, quietly at first, then freely, her voice sounding strange to her own ears after so many silent years. The young woman smiled. "You have a beautiful laugh," she said. After her guest left, the house no longer felt empty. It pulsed with warmth, as if joy itself had lingered in the air. She walked through each room, her steps light, and whispered, "You did this, didn't you?" She could almost feel him smile in response. That night she lit a candle by her window. Its small flame flickered softly, a signal of life, not for others to see, but for heaven to know. She wasn't forgotten anymore. She was part of the living once again. Evenings had once been the hardest, the hours when memories pressed close and silence felt cruel, but now they had become her favorite. The twilight carried a holy calm, wrapping her house in golden peace. She sat by her window, the garden swaying gently in the breeze. Her cup of tea grew cold in her hands, but she didn't mind. She was watching the sunset, that quiet passing of light into rest, and for the first time she understood it. The day doesn't die. It simply surrenders to the night, trusting that dawn will come again. Her heart was like that now, resting, not breaking. The fear of death, the ache of loneliness, the heaviness of time, all had melted into peace. She no longer waited for signs or miracles. She didn't need them. Jesus was with her, and that was enough. She whispered one last prayer before sleep. "Thank you for staying." And as her eyes closed, she felt it again. That warmth, that presence. It didn't speak. It didn't need to. It simply was. The house grew still, the candle's flame trembling gently beside her. The night settled around her like a blanket woven of peace. And even after sleep claimed her, the presence remained. Quiet, constant, eternal. Jesus had entered. And he would never leave.